Story 1. The Final Letter. Lena sat at her kitchen table, staring blankly at the cup of cold coffee in front of her. It was a Saturday morning, but it felt more like a Sunday, heavy and laden with finality. The sound of rustling paper brought her back to the present. She picked up the letter from Mark, the one she had read a dozen times but still struggled to comprehend. Maybe it's for the best, she whispered to herself, trying to convince her heart of the words. They had been together for 3 years, but lately their conversations had dwindled to hollow exchanges, their laughter replaced by silence. Mark's letter had laid bare the reality. They had grown apart, drifting in different directions. Lena remembered the moments that led to this point, the late-night talks, the plans they'd made, the way he used to make her feel like the only person in the world. But over the months, those moments had faded, overshadowed by misunderstandings and unmet expectations. As she read the letter again, tears filled her eyes. Mark had written about his love for her, how it would always be there, but he felt suffocated, trapped in a relationship that no longer fit. He had moved out the previous week, leaving behind the remnants of their life together. Furniture, laughter, memories. With a shaky breath, she grabbed a pen and began to write her response. "I understand," she started, feeling the weight of her own heartbreak spilling onto the page. She poured out her feelings, the love that still lingered, mixed with an aching acceptance. After sealing the letter, she made her way to the mailbox, the cold air hitting her like a wake-up call. As she dropped the envelope inside, she felt a mix of relief and sadness. It was done. They would go their separate ways, but part of her would always cherish what they had. Later that evening, Lena went for a walk in the park they used to visit together. The leaves crunched under her feet, vibrant hues of orange and yellow swirling around her. She found a bench and sat, allowing herself to remember the laughter, the stolen kisses, the promises they had made. But the laughter felt distant now, like an echo fading into silence. With every breath, she felt a small part of her healing, realizing that breakups could be a new beginning, not just an end. As she watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the park, she understood that love didn't always last, but it could still shape who she was. In the weeks that followed, Lena began to rediscover herself. She picked up old hobbies, reconnected with friends, and started to dream again. While the pain of the breakup lingered, she found strength in the solitude. One night, while sitting on her couch with a book, she received a text from Mark. "I miss you." Her heart raced, but she took a moment to breathe. She typed back a simple response. "I miss you too, but we're okay." As she hit send, Lena realized that she was ready to embrace the future, whatever it held. The chapter with Mark had closed, but her story was just beginning, filled with hope and the promise of new adventures ahead. Story 2. The Weight of Goodbye. Sophie stood at the edge of the city park, watching the leaves fall from the trees in slow, spiraling dances. It was late October, and the air was crisp with the promise of winter. She could feel the chill seep into her bones, but it was nothing compared to the heaviness in her heart. After 3 years, it had come down to this moment, a goodbye. She glanced at her phone, the screen illuminated with a text from Jake. "Can we meet?" It was a question that had loomed over her for days, a question that had been shadowed by the inevitability of their impending breakup. They had once been inseparable, two souls who fit together perfectly. They shared dreams, laughter, and plans for the future, but lately, the spark had dimmed, replaced by tension and unspoken words. Arguments had become more frequent, and the love that had once seemed unbreakable now felt fragile, ready to shatter. As she waited on the bench, her thoughts spiraled back to happier times. Their first date at the quaint cafe, the late-night drives with the windows down, and the way he would look at her as if she were the only person in the world. But those memories were laced with a growing sense of disconnect. as if they were drifting on separate currents. When Jake arrived, he looked different, tired, his eyes shadowed. He sat beside her, their shoulders brushing, a brief reminder of the closeness they once shared. "I'm glad you came," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sophie nodded, the words caught in her throat. She wanted to say everything and nothing at once. Instead, she turned to face him, searching his eyes for the answers she needed. "I've been thinking," Jake continued, his gaze falling to his hands. "I don't think we're the same people we were when we met. I feel like we're just stuck." Sophie's heart sank, but she knew he was right. They had changed, grown in different directions. The dreams they once shared felt like distant echoes, overshadowed by the weight of unmet expectations. "I've felt it too," she admitted, her voice trembling. "It's like we're holding on to something that's already gone." Silence hung between them, heavy and charged. Sophie could feel tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back. This wasn't how she wanted to remember their last moments together. "Do you think we can be friends?" Jake asked, his expression hopeful yet pained. Sophie took a deep breath, the air thick with nostalgia. "Maybe, but it will take time." She wanted to believe it, but the thought of seeing him with someone else felt like a dagger to her heart. Jake nodded, understanding etched in his features. "I just want you to be happy, Soph. You deserve that." The sincerity in his voice made her ache. They had shared so much love, laughter, and companionship, and now it was unraveling into something unrecognizable. "I want you to be happy too," she replied softly, tears finally escaping. "I don't want this to end, but I know we can't keep pretending." With a final sigh, Jake reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers for the last time. It felt warm and familiar, a bittersweet reminder of what they had shared. "I'll always care about you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Me too," Sophie whispered, feeling the weight of goodbye settle around them. As they stood, Sophie realized that letting go didn't mean erasing the past. It meant carrying the memories with her, learning from them as she moved forward. They embraced, holding on tightly for just a moment longer, feeling the pulse of what had been. When they finally pulled away, the world around them felt different, darker yet full of potential. They walked together in silence for a few steps before turning to face one another for the last time. "Goodbye, Jake," Sophie said, a mix of sorrow and hope in her heart. "Goodbye, Sophie," he replied, his voice steady. As she walked away, Sophie felt the weight of their shared history lifting, replaced by the lightness of possibility. The trees continued to shed their leaves, and with each step, she embraced the change, ready to find herself anew. Story 3. The Space Between Us. Maya stood in her tiny apartment, surrounded by boxes half-packed and memories scattered like autumn leaves. The air felt thick with unspoken words and unfinished conversations. After 5 years together, she and Liam had finally come to the conclusion that love alone wasn't enough to hold them together anymore. It had started with small arguments, dishes left undone, forgotten dates, and the way Liam would always prioritize his work over their plans. At first, Maya brushed it off as a phase, thinking they would find their way back to each other. But as the months turned into years, the distance between them grew, becoming a chasm that felt impossible to bridge. Now, with their breakup imminent, Maya found herself trapped in a whirlwind of emotions. Sadness and anger warred within her, but the overwhelming feeling was one of profound loss. She had envisioned a future with Liam, a shared life full of adventures, laughter, and quiet moments. Instead, she was faced with the reality of packing up their life together, a life that had felt so solid just months ago. As she sorted through the clutter of their shared existence, her fingers grazed the spine of a book they had read together on lazy Sunday afternoons. It brought back flashes of laughter and warmth, but those memories felt tainted now, stained by the realization that they had lost each other along the way. The door creaked open, and Liam stepped in, his expression a mixture of apprehension and resignation. "Hey," he said softly, taking in the sight of boxes stacked precariously in the living room. "Hey," Maya replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The sight of him brought a swell of nostalgia, and she could feel her heartache resurfacing. "Are you ready to talk?" he asked, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, the familiar gesture a reminder of the comfort they used to find in each other. "Yeah, I guess we should," she said, gesturing to the small couch that had held countless conversations, both lighthearted and serious. They sat down, a palpable tension hanging in the air. "I can't believe it's come to this," Liam said, his voice low. "I thought we could work things out." "Me too," Maya admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "But I feel like we've been trying to fix something that's already broken." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor as if the carpet held the answers to their unraveling. "I've been so focused on my job that I lost sight of us. I thought if I worked harder, it would make everything else easier." Maya took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. "I get that, but I also need someone who can be present. I've felt so alone, even when we were together." The silence that followed was thick with shared regret. Maya wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap that had widened between them, but she knew that it was time to let go. "Maybe we just grew apart," Liam finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And that's okay, right?" "Yeah," she replied, feeling a sense of clarity wash over her. "It's hard to accept, but it's true. We've changed, and we can't keep holding on to what we used to be." "I'll always care about you, Maya," he said, looking her in the eye. "You were my best friend." "And you were mine," she replied, her heart aching. "But sometimes friendships change, and that's part of life." As they talked, the tension began to dissipate. They shared their fears about the future and the pain of letting go. There were no more harsh words, just an understanding that they had both tried their best. When the conversation came to a close, they stood up, both feeling lighter yet sadder. Maya wiped away a stray tear, and Liam offered a small smile, one that spoke of gratitude and closure. "Let's not make this the end of our story," he said. "Just a new chapter." "Agreed," she replied, feeling a flicker of hope amidst the heartache. "We can still be in each other's lives, just differently." As Liam left, Maya felt an unexpected sense of peace. The space between them felt less like a void and more like a possibility for new beginnings. She stood in the center of the apartment, surrounded by boxes that now symbolized not just an ending, but the promise of growth. With each box she packed, Maya realized that the future was hers to shape. It would take time to heal, but she was ready to embrace the journey ahead, one step at a time. Story 4. The final performance. The theater was dimly lit, the faint scent of dust and old wood mingling in the air. Clara sat backstage, her heart racing as she waited for her cue. Tonight was the final performance of The Heart's Reckoning, the play she had poured her soul into. But the excitement of the show was overshadowed by the weight of her impending breakup with Ethan, the man who had been both her partner on and off the stage. For months, they had been growing apart, lost in their own worlds. Clara was immersed in rehearsals and ambitions, while Ethan, once a passionate actor, had withdrawn into himself. Their once lively conversations had dwindled to mundane exchanges, and the spark that had ignited their relationship felt extinguished. As the lights began to dim, she heard the familiar sound of Ethan's voice from the wings, rehearsing his lines. His talent had always amazed her, and she couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. They had shared dreams of a future together, yet here they were, facing the end of what had once seemed so promising. When the curtain finally rose, Clara stepped into the spotlight, her heart heavy, but her resolve firm. The play unfolded beautifully, their performances intertwining as if they were still the perfect pair. Every shared glance and touch on stage felt electric, a bittersweet reminder of what they were about to lose. As the final scene approached, Clara's mind raced with emotions. The climax of the play mirrored their own story, a heartbreaking farewell. She could see Ethan across the stage, his expression a mix of sorrow and understanding. It was as if they were both aware that this performance was not just fiction, it was a reflection of their reality. The last lines echoed through the theater, filled with raw emotion. Clara delivered her final monologue, each word heavy with the weight of their relationship. Sometimes love isn't enough to keep two hearts together. We must learn to let go, even when it hurts. As the final curtain fell, Clara felt a wave of relief wash over her, mingled with grief. The audience erupted into applause, but all she could focus on was Ethan. He stood at the edge of the stage, his expression unreadable. When the applause faded and the lights dimmed, Clara found herself walking toward him. They stood face to face, the air thick with unsaid words. "Clara," he began, but she raised a hand to stop him. "Let's not make this harder than it has to be," she said, her voice steady. "We both know it's time." Ethan sighed, the weight of resignation hanging between them. "I wish things could be different. I wanted us to be happy." "I did too," Clara admitted, her eyes glistening with tears. "But we've lost our way. I don't want to resent each other for the dreams we once had." He nodded, a sad smile breaking through his sadness. "You're going to be amazing, you know that? You'll shine on every stage you step onto." "And you will too," she replied, her heart aching. "You have so much talent. I hope you find your passion again." With a final embrace, they held each other tightly, both seeking comfort in the familiarity of their connection. But as they pulled away, Clara felt the space between them widen, a sign of their impending separation. "Goodbye, Ethan," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Goodbye, Clara," he whispered, stepping back into the shadows. As she walked off the stage, Clara felt a mix of sorrow and liberation. The breakup would be painful, but it was also a chance for both of them to grow. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their past lift with each step. Outside, the night was crisp and clear. Clara looked up at the stars, feeling a renewed sense of hope. The final performance had marked an end, but it also opened the door to new beginnings. She was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that even in loss, there was always the potential for growth and transformation.